Okay, today we are talking about the repercussions of a line in Liber AL vel Legis, and I just realized I haven't actually heard that particular way of talking about the Book of the Law said out loud, so it could be totally mispronounced. Do not look at me as an authority on pronunciation of anything. My variable pronunciation over time should make that clear enough. But we're talking about a line in the Book of the Law, which is the central revealed, depending on what you believe, text of Thelema, and how to bring those ideals into the lives we live from day to day. If you're a Thelemite, you will know this constitutes pestilence, because what I'm doing is adding a comment to the Book of the Law, and discussing the Book of the Law is, I'll put it up on the screen at some point, but it's pestilence that should be avoided by all people, or whatever. And I'm doing exactly that, pestilence. But, and I think a lot of Thelemites miss this, pestilence is not necessarily a bad thing, not necessarily something that we want to avoid, even if others do. As it is written, "Envenom your arrow, may your pox eat me to the marrow. You have got me, I love you to rob me." Now, that's a bit censored, but not exceptionally so. Still, the premise that pestilence is something that can be sought and pursued and embraced is perfectly valid in Thelema. Take care of yourself, always prioritize your own view over anyone else's. Carefully consider what others say, but do not take anything anyone, including Crowley, says as gospel. Obviously. Well, maybe it's not obvious, but an important premise in Thelema is that we go by our own conscience, our own analysis, because only we know ourselves and our path in its full color, principles, and priorities. The expert on us is us. What we are doing in our own lives ultimately comes down to us. The individual has some say in who they become and what they do. And if you don't want pestilence, go away. But if you do, hi. So this particular video was inspired by a Substack by Marco Viconti on Liber AL vel Legis. It's AL 359, which is just 4 words in that particular line. "As brothers fight ye," with an exclamation mark. His comment absolutely delighted me. I thought it was great. He both covered the verse's meaning in a literal and more metaphorical, allegorical sense, while pointing out flaws in a certain organization with regard to how this verse is applied, and using verses to proof text absolutely abhorrent behavior is not new to Thelema. It's quite common in both. Actually, it's probably common in all religions. They use that line as a proof text to encourage internal dissent and allow attacks and character assassinations and things of that nature. That's the allegation. I don't actually know. I don't care that much, frankly. That's not true. I care. Like, I want there to be a healthy Thelemic body near me. I love the people at my local lodge. They're fantastic, great conversations, beautiful rituals. Absolutely worth showing up, at least every now and then, but I don't like this notion about what happens the higher up you get. I keep hearing bad things from people who are credible, and they're the same bad things over and over again. These are common in any organization, to be clear. Hierarchies create power imbalances, and power imbalances create problems. But let's go on. His assertion that using this verse to promote pettiness and infighting, and especially attacking of people who may have been cast out or left the organization, because they've been using it for that reason, there's led to a sort of internal rot of evil people rising to the top and good people leaving, which is understandable. A corrupt organization does not actually invite the participation of people who don't like dealing with drama and nonsense and abuse. But anyway, if that's the case, I really appreciate his stuff all the way down the line. And even if it's not the case in the OTO, it's certainly the case in plenty of other organizations and groups of people. But there are very practical ways to avoid this while encouraging a fighting spirit amongst people within a group. And that is what I'm discussing today. Longest preamble ever. Basically, this video has tips to help you fight in a way that is helpful for each individual combatant and the group as a whole. We're at the point where we give the tips. It's not just tips, it's also discussion of like psychological principles that lie behind what I advise, and the tips aren't nearly as fleshed out as I would like. Maybe I'll do that in another video, I don't know. Right now I'm talking about the Thelemic verse. This is pestilence, nothing's to help you do anything productive. Oh. Dislocating. I feel like a lot of people's condemnation of the third book of Liber Legis in particular comes from a mistaken understanding of what peace is and what fighting ought to be. And if the OTO is promulgating a mistaken interpretation that causes harm instead of help, I can't say I'm surprised. It's not the sort of balance that a lot of people understand properly. I certainly don't either, not entirely. This is one of those verses that is particularly disastrous if you miss the healthy interpretation and go with the ego enforcing and antisocial interpretation. Those are all over the third book in particular, and I think that's what people respond negatively to, but the alternate reading that is helpful is humbling, partially because you see yourself slowly lose track of your illusions about what this text must mean and gain a better balanced, more accurate and nuanced version of the way that we have to think of ourselves, interact with ourselves, and behave in the world in general. It's the most fruitful text I've found to meditate upon, partially because you're going to read some of them in ways that are vile before you find the right thing, because we all have reservations and misunderstandings and incomplete knowledge that holds us back. Meditating on verses that you find abhorrent is a good way to move forward as far as that goes, and I spent a long time meditating on this one in particular. That Substack article is going to be linked in the description. It covers the various interpretations that I'm not going to talk about here, like using as brothers fight thee on oneself as opposed to anyone that you're in a fraternity. No, not a fraternity. Yeah, a fraternal organization with. Because that's obviously not helpful. But he talks about the helpful methods of doing it, and that's excellent. But I wanted to talk about the way that we can enact that in organizations that we make or even that we're members of. It's passive influence when you're only a member, but even if you are just a member, it can be useful. You won't affect the people in power who think they control you, but you can at least create better relationships with the people that you know and care about personally. This is my comment on Marco Vicante's comment, on Alistair Crowley's comment, on verse 359 of the Book of the Law. Yeah, I just like being obnoxious. Alright, if you're ready, we can go. Fighting is wonderful. It knocks sense into people, not just you and me, but also all the people around who both observe and support various aspects of the fight. It allows our ideas, our strength, our endurance, and things like our empathy and social skills to be tested dynamically in action with another person. It also allows for testing physical traits and developing physical traits if we're engaging in a physical form of fighting as opposed to a verbal and intellectual battle, which is what I'm actually discussing here. If we do this right, we all end up stronger, wiser, and more knowledgeable than we were going in, both about the world, the other person, and ourselves as well. The weird thing about fighting, the thing that most people don't seem to anticipate, is that it can also lead to us depending more stolidly upon the other person we fought with. That one's going to seem particularly counterintuitive if you've experienced things like the allegations toward the OTO in the Substack article that I'm referencing. When you've seen or been involved in a lot of unproductive fighting, imagining productive fighting can be very difficult. But it absolutely can be productive, and it is only that type of fighting that we actually want to encourage, or for that matter, engage in. There's a reason that battle brothers duke it out when they have a real disagreement and then come to fight side by side in battle. My first reading of As Brothers Fight You was precisely that, fighting together in battle, going in side by side. Though I do think it is also important to read it as interpersonal conflict, as well as, of course, the meanings that the article I'm linking talked about. Because these are all important ways to fight. We fight with the people that we love and are close to, and we also fight against them to spar, to find the correct position, to come to agreements on how we ought to do things. And ideally, it shouldn't be brute force that does this either mentally, emotionally, or in any other way. It should be coming to a conclusion that is at least somewhat amicable for everyone. The point is to challenge our own ideas as we interact and fight with others, not just to challenge theirs at any cost. We want to find the errors within ourselves, especially in an intellectual or interpersonal discussion. Because we don't want to be alone forever. We don't want to be in an animosity-riddled environment. We want to sort out our differences so that they can become a communal plan and a bond between us. We want to be battle brothers, not just brothers battling. Our family should be our closest, truest, most enduring allies, but that's only possible when we are open, honest, and communicate how we are internally and what we actually want and need. Cruelty, spite, shaming, forcing someone into compliance based upon whoever has the most power, these don't actually create union. They create the weaker party turning in on themselves and burying everything inside themselves, but doesn't actually resolve any conflict. It just makes the conflict silent and impossible to address, which is a more unstable and less collaborative and less communal form of living. Real bonds require real fights. Real collaboration requires real disagreement before you reach the point where everyone is at least fairly satisfied for now, certainly satisfied with how things will turn out in the final estimation. In a healthy environment, conflict is something that fortifies rather than decays and degrades relationships. A family doesn't grow and a line doesn't continue if it cuts down its own members, and if that organization is genuinely encouraging this self-destructive fighting, then it's no wonder they've struggled to grow the past few decades. We won't grow until we do the right thing and teach the things that actually help communities and individuals to grow. Blight doesn't bloom. Now, if you want a healthy environment to fight, an environment where you can nurture your skills and nurture their skills simultaneously while you hash out a real point of conflict, not just a practice battle or something to specifically hone your skills, you need to begin from a place of deep, genuine, mutual respect. If you remember and acknowledge that every fighter brings unique goods to the table, it's a lot easier to do this. And the secret is everyone does bring unique and valuable insights to any fight whatsoever. Some of those insights are just telling us about what the person's character is like, and that's not always the best. But even ignorant young people who know almost nothing of what's going on bring us closer into alignment with the people who do not yet know what we know, who cannot yet do what we can do. And that helps us learn how to better instruct and how to better guide them. A stupid question is a good question because it teaches us how to prevent stupid questions in the future. It makes reality more explicit to that person and helps us learn to communicate the important things that we know and want for them. So, teachers learn from students just as much as students learn from teachers. All of it's important. And all of it's equally, and all of it's very valuable. And dismissing that value is a quick way to ensuring that you do not learn, you do not grow, you do not develop your skills, which, I hope you don't want that. I know I am continually surprised by the interactions that have dramatically helped me in my life. I'll go into an argument tired or angry or indignant at what they've just said, and I'll leave genuinely thankful for what they've given me in the conversation, for what they were able to teach me. And they don't always teach me about the subject we're talking about. Sometimes I know a lot more than them about that. Sometimes I don't, in which case I accept that as well, even though it's more embarrassing. But they also teach me about my own character, my own emotional health, and the lessons that I still need to learn to become the stable and helpful and happy person that I would like to be. When I converse with people, when I see myself get angry or annoyed or impatient, I see things that I need to develop in myself. I also see errors they may need to have corrected on their part, but that's okay. We're allowed to do it both ways. The point is, even those conversations, even the conversations where the other party doesn't learn anything at all, we can learn something from them And it is good and right to do exactly that, because why would you throw away an opportunity for growth? Wisdom says be strong. You want to fight that battle. You don't want to run away and play instead. None of this learning occurs when I seek to destroy them in battle instead of learn from them while teaching them. When I only aim to hurt people, only harm is done to either of us. When I do that, that's me at my least constructive, and yeah, that happens way more than I like admitting. I'd even argue that a pure interest in instructing someone can be insufferable. When you're only aiming to educate another person rather than learn from them simultaneously, you're basically giving up on your own growth, your own improvement, and favoring them instead. It's a weird kind of self-sacrifice, and a kind that people tend not to enjoy being subject to. It's condescending self-sacrifice to only teach with no expectation of learning yourself, or of practicing skills you need to practice yourself. That's not really something anybody wants, I don't think. It really is best to enter conversations, even arguments, with an intention and expectation that you will learn as much as you teach. You just may learn a different manner of things than you are teaching. There's no reason for superiority or condescension or hostility in any of these cases, though I grant that all three can be functionally inevitable, given that we are really just humans with limited minds and sometimes overwhelming emotions. Now, destroying the enemy and forcing them to take whatever pain comes with that can sometimes be necessary or justified, or at least I think that's the case. I could easily be wrong on this point, but that is my current feeling, my current thought. Sometimes you do just need, not want, but need to destroy someone utterly. But that is absolutely a last resort. It's not something we should rush towards or have set at our default. The default should always be mutual connection, mutual learning, and mutual help. Not just, let's crush our enemies. Punishment, and destroying your enemies is definitely a punishment, is always a last resort. Mutual respect and a desire to help and collaborate with others is just more productive for everyone than wasting our time trying to destroy people who are beyond redemption. Those people are best escaped and ignored if they rise to your attention, which could be why a lot of people have left the OTL. Wasting the sharpness of your blade on a solid, dense rock that will just break down the blade and lead to it being less adept at its chosen and necessary and productive task. Don't hurt yourself like that. Instead, it's best to create a collaborative space where all members can bring what they know and what they have and what they excel at, and share it in a little pool on the table with everyone else who's around. That's the ideal. You want civility and the civilization it allows. Everyone using their strengths to serve themselves and everyone else. Which means we're all slaves, I guess, but I'd rather be a slave to a master than be constantly attacking the masters who can guide me towards the skills and knowledge and abilities I want. Because those are my goal, not just feeling like I'm superior. And that brings me to how you can tell whether a fight is productive, because we really do want to emphasize on holding firm to what we know, to what we know we're good at. And ideally, we want to listen and notice when people bring things up that can genuinely correct things that we don't know, that we are weak in, that we don't fully understand yet. It's only by collaborating and focusing on and nurturing and lifting up all of the good in each of us that we can do the best that we can together and individually. We want the good, we want to get rid of the bad so that we can flourish. This isn't possible when any person thinks that they know everything and other people know nothing. And when someone we're interacting with is weaker or more ignorant than us in certain respects, the kind thing isn't mocking them or shaming them for that. It's teaching them what they need to know, ideally by example, but also through more formal, intellectual, and abstract instruction. It's usually the prerogative, well, the responsibility of the more advanced person in any area to be responsible for the other person who isn't strong enough yet. It's like a parent holding the hands of a toddler as they walk. Yes, they're liable to fall, but you don't attack them for falling. You help them back up, and you help them learn the skills they need to hold themselves up. Being wrong is not a sin. Lacking knowledge or skill is not a sin. We don't condemn it. We aim to strengthen and improve it so that that weakness and that depravity and that destruction no longer has a natural space inside the people that we are helping. And inside ourselves, because it's very easy to tell ourselves we're doing fine and we're just advanced enough and we don't need to progress anymore. We want to feel like, well, our egos want us to feel spectacular, and the truth is we all have a lot to learn. But acknowledging that is better, is more helpful, and allows for better communities to form than claiming otherwise. The world is hierarchical in any given skill, any given knowledge. There are people who know more or less, can do more or less in an objective sense. But we all do better and worse on different hierarchies. Respecting that and deferring when you can see that someone else is better than you is good, and trying to see what other people are better at than you and trying to learn from them is much better than trying to attack them for the points in which they're weaker than you are. We want as much strength as possible in the whole world, not just in ourselves, because real strength, genuine strength, helps everyone. And when you try to snipe down the evil ones and send them into perdition, all you're actually doing is showing your own pettiness, your own insecurity, your own inability to seek out the good in other people. You're basically showing that you are weak, that you are poor, that you lack knowledge and grace and stability and all of those senses. She's crying. Personally, I don't like looking that weak. I do it sometimes, but I always regret it afterwards. Once again, wisdom says be strong. The easiest way to lose a fight is to proclaim that you already know everything and you already have everything and you're already the best. That just shows how weak you are. But when we fight, it is best to keep the fight safe and fruitful rather than let it be destructive. You may hear that and think that I'm talking about coddling each other or not challenging each other, and nothing could be further from the truth. Babying each other doesn't let us grow. We need to challenge each other, but we need to challenge each other in ways that are appropriate for the skills we have in the field in which we are levying the challenge. Everyone needs a stepwise motion to improve in every area. If you make them behave in a way that is too far beyond their abilities, it'll all crash down and they'll be destroyed, even if you have good intentions and even if you're not trying to bring them down. We want as many people as possible strong and wise and able to contribute to the world and create the best environment for everyone that we possibly can. And that means that we can't crush weakness. It means we have to try to nurture it and make it better. And to do that, the people who know more in any given field have to work as hard as they can to help others become as good as they can. The weaker party never deserves to be beaten. Well, I feel like sometimes they probably do, but that's probably just me being a bit wicked. However, we do create a better world only by helping people be as strong as they can be. And as wise and as good as they can be. Well, good. We don't do that by coddling them. We also don't do it by ripping them down. We do it by helping them develop based upon where they are and what goal seems attainable to them at that point. No one can do this perfectly, but it's certainly something we should all try. Being open, honest, and direct, being assertive, not aggressive, is what's necessary to accomplish that goal. And ideally, you want to create space for that in your competitor as well, because that aspect of personal growth is just as important as whatever the conversation is about. A lot of skills are necessary for this, and I'm not going to cover how to develop all of them in this video. You need empathy, you need mutual understanding, and understanding of the topic at hand. You need solid communication skills, not easy. Okay, some people think it's easy, but I don't. You need forgiveness, but You need accountability with that forgiveness. That's a delicate balance. I may need to make a whole video on that too. Anyway, you need empathy, understanding, solid communication, forgiveness, and the repair of the relationship when it inevitably ruptures while we engage in these mutual challenges before we are strong enough to do them successfully and productively all the time yet. Which is to say, basically, while we're alive. These aren't masks. They are real skills that take time to develop, and faking having them by giving apologies when you don't feel sad or regretful and making space for someone when you don't understand why they need space are not ways to do this productively. That just turns the conflict in instead of making it in the world. Inner conflict and outer conflict are both harmful when they are working in a destructive rather than a challenging and productive way. Which makes things quite difficult, I know, but that's the goal. Because peace founded on lies isn't peace at all. We want peace, not internal rather than external conflict. The best way to get there is to have it out in an open and kind and considerate and compassionate, yes, compassionate way. And to find a resolution that is at least somewhat amenable to everyone in the room. You don't just be nice because someone is your brother. That's not how this works. Repressing dissent only keeps the battle raging inside, and it will have actions that impact the whole, but even just an internal battle like that, I wouldn't wish that on anybody, certainly not on a brother or a sister that I genuinely care about. Nurturing an environment that encourages that it's unconscionable. If you want real peace, you must fight until the battle is won. Until people find real peace, real collaboration, and real cooperation. Cooperation isn't just doing things that someone else tells you to do. It's respecting and interacting with and employing each of your skills for each other. That is what family is. Well, healthy family. I know a lot of families are unhealthy, and it's a pity that my religion seems to be one of them. Don't leave the wounds in your organization, your group, or your brothers and sisters to rot. You want to drain out the pus and let it heal properly. You don't want an infection causing sepsis that goes through the body and will destroy it. Unless, you're into destroying, the OTO or your families or things like that. And despite the current illness that people keep talking about, that's not something I want either. When you allow illness and infection and disease to spread and fester within people and between people in an organization, you're making a great miss. The book of the law cannot be advocating that because of the real harm that is done when that is encouraged. Anyone who is saying this is a good idea is, at least in this respect, completely fucking wrong. How do we create a safe space for sparring between brothers and, for that matter, sisters and anyone in between? First, you, as an individual, have to be a safe space and encourage the adoption of attitudes of being that create safe spaces for others to talk and share who they are in an open and honest way. And if you don't create a safe space, if you aren't a safe person, you will not hear any of that. It will be out of bounds for you. It will be in another world that you can't even access. Personally, I like my kingdom to be as large as possible, so I want to know as much as I can about other people because, well, that's what conquest is, isn't it? You can't fight what you can't see, so that should never be the goal. I've always been told more than I thought was reasonable by other people, and it took me a long time to figure out why that's the case, but I do think I've more or less cracked it, and it is a skill that can be taught. Dialogue between people is, especially early on, a bid from one person to the other to find out whether that person is safe to talk to, whether they're going to be toxic and harmful, and whether they can be trusted. It's assessing people for how attentive they are, how kind they are, how entertaining they are. Even small talk exists to test these social boundaries and figure out where everyone lies on the various spectrum of character traits and interpersonal skills that we need to get along with each other. And if you're aware of this, then you can both use that information to your advantage and nudge the conversation into deeper territory, which is not just great if you want to fight, because fighting usually occurs once we enter these deeper waters, but it's also great if you just hate small talk, because the quickest way to end small talk is to get into those deep waters. And you get into those deep waters by behaving in a very special way, a very specific way, and creating space for the person to drag us into the deep. Small talk works by someone saying something tiny, innocuous, uncontroversial, and someone else responding to that with usually a very similarly shallow, uncontroversial, uninteresting response. And small talk stays uninteresting because we're encouraging each other to stay in the shallows the whole time when we do this. If you indicate by matching their tone that you want to stay in that area, that's what they're going to do. But there are ways to gently challenge people into more interesting and enjoyable and frankly dangerous territory. And doing that in its most fruitful way lets people know through conversation that you are keeping and creating space for them to be themselves. A space to be themselves without judgment or aggression or hatred or anger in response. People especially like this if you seem actively curious and genuinely interested in them because, well, it flatters their ego a bit, but I think everyone deserves to be loved, so there's nothing wrong with that. When people feel like you are a safe person in this world that we all share that has so much scariness in it, they will get deep pretty fast and you'll learn more about them than may seem appropriate. It's really the way to encourage oversharing, which I like because nothing is actually an overshare in my opinion. I want it all. Tell me it all. So, the quickest way to encourage people to get into fights with you is to be kind, non-judgmental, and genuinely curious about them and what they think and feel. When people sense that you both genuinely want to know what they have to say and that you're a safe person to say things to, they'll start telling you crazy stuff quite quickly. And if you're inclined to fight, that's how you get to the place where you can. Being open, being curious, being kind tells others that you don't want or need to hurt them to bolster or protect yourself. And that invites people in. The quickest way I found to do this in practice is briefly sharing about myself or my feelings while expressing empathy for them and interest in what they have to say. That sounds like a lot all at once, but it's really not as complicated in practice. For example, if they're talking about the weather, if they say like, "It's so hot," you can respond with something like, "Yeah, I hate how hot it is. I always feel like a snowman melting in a field when it's like this." And that response offers a lot of different launching points that allow the conversation to potentially go deeper. There's some absurd imagery, there's a little bit of humor, there's an expression of empathy, and there is an expression of your own emotions. All of these open the door for all of those, and more if your interlocutor is particularly creative, to go down. The whole point of being a good conversationalist, the essential skill, is creating various different branches of discussion that people can go down that talk about emotions, talk about controversial opinions, and talk about things that we know or have experienced that may not be polite conversation, but are certainly interesting. Now, it can be important to match energy before you do that, because some people will be timid if their energy isn't initially matched, but you can encourage them to keep talking in a more subtle way if you want to give them a little bit more time to realize that you are a safe person to talk to. And that's just demonstrating kindness, demonstrating curiosity, and accepting whatever they come out with in response as good and interesting and worth exploring further. And this method, even though it seems nice and safe and kind and pro-social, does get you to arguments faster because it creates a sense of safety. That brings whatever is hidden inside people out into the open air, which is when we fight. And if conflict is the goal, that's just a happy day. If conflict isn't the goal, then you may wish you didn't engage. I know, I often think that way. People feel safe when they are seen and they feel accepted. That is the key. If you want people to talk to you or to fight with you in a productive way, they need to know that you're listening to them, that you want to hear more, and that you care about what they have to say and what they feel. Otherwise, you're just going to go into unpleasant places for no good reason. Small talk evolved to let us do exactly that, but a lot of people choose to stay in the shallows instead of going deeper, or don't realize that there are ways to go deeper. But there are, and this is how. Now, how you respond to the conflicts that inevitably arise from real intimacy on a verbal and emotional level is what creates the culture of the relationship or the group you're involved with. For maximum growth, you want the most honesty and the most forthrightness that is possible to gain, for the reasons we've already discussed. And to do that, you can't attack each other's character. You can't highlight known or suspected insecurities to try to gain the upper hand. In fact, you probably shouldn't want the upper hand at all. You want everyone involved to grow, not just you. And if your interlocutor employs these or other destructive habits, the correct response is engaging it as little as possible and redirecting the conversation, the interaction, to more productive ways of interacting. If you respond negatively, they may feel bolstered egoically from that. And if you respond in a positive or submissive manner to their action, they're going to feel bolstered by that too. Either way, it just accelerates the conflict. Trying to divert hostility, divert unfair and uncouth and uncivilized behavior, you want to divert it. You don't want to encourage it by engaging it or submitting to it, because that would just encourage the repeated use of those actions in your relationship or your organization, which is the last thing you want. You want to calmly, kindly, without negative judgment, redirect them to what you should actually be talking about, which takes a lot of patience. It takes a lot of endurance, it takes a lot of strength, but well, if you fail early on, that's fine. Just know that that's the goal. And it's the goal because we shape our communities and our relationships by the activities and responses we encourage and tolerate. Proving that they're effective tactics by engaging with insults or responding in kind or submitting to them will all create a culture you do not want in whatever group you are in. Antisocial, argumentative tactics are diversion methods. Diversion doesn't get us to the goal of real resolution. Instead, it gets resentment, self-censorship, and all manner of other horrible things that do not help group cohesion and do not help people work together and do not help the individual members grow as much as they can. We want all of our stars to shine as brightly as possible. We don't want them to mute their light for someone else's. That's ridiculous. If you must engage with insults or rage, if you can't just divert it, then it's best to do it while assuring the angry and uncivilized person that you both respect and admire and enjoy their company and who they are. You don't want them to feel like you think less of them just because you're unwilling to engage in their vitriol. You want them to know that you care even while you are pointing them towards a different course of action. You want loving parent energy, not schoolyard bully energy. Getting emotionally incensed is a good way to shut down this process and lead to counterproductive goals being reached. Which means that if you are too emotionally outraged or too angry to redirect calmly, disengaging is often the best course of action. But you can't just run away or say, I'm going over there. You have to engage them as you disengage to reassure them that you respect them, this is an important issue, and you want to talk about it and resolve the issue, but you need space and time to calm down first because you are not perfect either. Now, does this always work? No, but it is the right way. And while not everyone will let this happen, it is still the right way to do it, and the kind of behavior and the kind of space creating in an argument that you want to encourage, because it maintains that mutual respect that is the foundation of all healthy interaction. It also keeps the issue on the table to make sure it can be genuinely resolved when you're both calmer and more sensible feeling. Most people who aren't outright abusive will take this opportunity. They won't really mind you doing it. They may be slightly frustrated, but it will be a short-term frustration that will cool during the break, because they don't want to hurt you any more than you want to hurt them. Now, people with less savory emotions or intentions or mindsets might not respond so kindly, but the best method of dealing with that is still do not engage so that you don't validate and reinforce the behavior. And sometimes you do have to cut people out of your life because they refuse to grow, they refuse to learn, they refuse to develop calm and mutually nurturing environments. That's a tragedy, but it's not a sign that they're inherently a terrible person who have no hope of improvement. It just means that they have so long to go and your skills are so low that you can't bring them to where they need to be yet. Breaking ties is the right decision when this is the case. There are things that can be taught to people who struggle to engage in peaceful relationships to help engage others. Emotional regulation, methods of monitoring and modifying our thought processes. And while some of those can be used for less savory purposes too, I'm just saying these are skills that can be taught, and we shouldn't hate someone just because they lack the skills that we consider necessary in order to be our peer. Excessive tolerance for bad behavior can also cause negative response by indulging in coddling and nurturing bad behavior and failure to develop skills. So it's always a balance and a difficult one to strike. Point is, we ought to be very conscious about what behavior we're encouraging and incentivizing when we interact with other people, especially people who are our family or who are in our religious organization that we consider close and important in our lives. Don't engage, don't react, redirect the conversation when inappropriate tactics are being used. That's it. Do it without judgment, do it with kindness, and with patience. Not easy, but that's part of why we fight, is to learn the skills to fight well. When we do it right, we become capable of consistently nurturing pleasant engagement, and we become capable of encouraging affection, honesty, mutual support, and real trust in each other. So, good skills. Frankly, I tend to appreciate people who get me upset because they point me towards areas of myself that I can work on, that I can improve. And while that doesn't mean I necessarily think they're right about everything, it does mean that they have helped me in a real way by being profoundly unhelpful. Which is weird, but it's not bad to reach that point for sure. A huge chunk of Thelema is personal growth, becoming bigger and stronger and better and more capable of enduring terrible things. So I find it hard for a Thelemite in particular to look at things like this as if they're actively bad. No, we don't want to encourage it like a festering wound in the organizations that we build. But we do want to engage with people when we disagree with them as much as we can productively to become better, stronger. We want a struggle, not a placid paradise where nobody ever fights. Trials, ordeals, challenges, you can avoid them when you're genuinely not strong enough to face them yet, but the goal should be developing the strength necessary to face these tasks productively and to make something good out of them. We want to seek trouble. Families and organizations that are healthy, which this type of thing is extraordinarily rare, unfortunately, encourage just this kind of conflict so that everyone can have a better environment and better solutions can be reached. So, once again, be respectful, attack ideas and not people, empathize with others, including people who are being little jerks, encourage growth, and reward people for doing things that head in the right direction, even if they haven't reached the goal yet. Do that with yourself, too. The goal is to find compromise, to find solutions that are happy for everyone, not just whatever you think is the right decision. That way, most people can be served, and frankly, most people can be used to provide the advantage that they have, the strengths that they have, inside your group or organization or family. We don't want those good things to go to waste, so we need to find ways to figure out who's best at any given task and use them for that, to find out what ideas are best in any given situation, and employ those. If there are people in the group who are habitually not served, we're probably also not taking advantage of them either. You want people to be served because happy, fulfilled, healthy people can better serve you. I mean, that's the selfish explanation, but it's also good for the world and other people as well. There's no downside to this method of doing things. So, encourage people to stand up and be who they are, even when you hate it. Yeah. Because nurturing others lets them nurture you, and that creates a better world for everybody. There will be failures on this path. None of us have the perfect strength of character or sufficient skills to navigate every conversation successfully. Some fights will be more destructive than helpful. And sometimes there's a genuine rupture in the relationship of two or more people. If you want to repair it, and I often encourage that, you do it by genuinely listening to each other, genuinely empathizing with each other, encouraging each person to express their actual thoughts and feelings without judgment, and while considering how each party feels about it as they're phrasing things, by both parties apologizing for the wrongdoing that they have done or would like to do. Probably not what they would like to do. Anyway, it's good to investigate to find where we've done wrong and where the other person has done wrong so that we can acknowledge it and correct course in the future. And then you make a plan based upon what all of this information has given you. That's how you repair a rupture. You redevelop that empathy, that understanding, and that respect for the desires and needs of each party. Either party shutting down or keeping quiet is just intensifying the division between the parties. It's not helpful. It's that festering wound again. You want everyone's needs and desires to be addressed. You want everyone's desires to be met in as much as they can be. We can't always get what we want, but we can work our best to ensure that everyone gets enough. This is the nature of civility and the bedrock of civilization itself. Respect, empathy, acceptance, and collaboration from all to build a better future for every single person involved. A healthy group cannot exist without these ingredients. Now, do I always do all the things I'm describing here? No, of course I don't. I'm not even close to doing this as consistently as even I think I ought to be at this point. Knowing how something is done and doing it reliably are two very different tasks. And I haven't come anywhere near mastering any of this. If I have hurt you at some point on account of this failure of strength on my part, I genuinely apologize, and I would like the opportunity to make things better. Because I'm learning, and part of why I seek out argument is learning to do better, developing these skills, and making it possible for me to do what I'm preaching about here more consistently. I, like everyone else, feel an instinctive desire to trample down my enemies, but what I ought to be trampling down is the parts of myself that lead to less fruitful outcomes. When I succeed, if I succeed, then I won't feel outraged when people do the equivalent of a 2-year-old's temper tantrum. I'll just know this is where they are, and I am in the position to guide them to something better. And I want everyone to have that kind of stability so that we aren't just buffeting each other out like pinballs. When I can't do that, I am only showing my poverty. And I don't want that. As Liber Legis says, a king may choose his garment as he will. There's no certain test. But a beggar cannot hide his poverty. Reactivity just kills all the good and all the potential that's there. Not worth it. But neither is repression for the same reason. Frustration isn't supposed to last forever, and disengaging, whether it's by beating the person you're talking to a verbal and intellectual pulp, or if it's by repressing real conflict that you still feel internally, doesn't lead to an end of frustration. It leads to continued conflict. Instead, we have to engage in a fight, in the conflict, in the confrontation that will allow us to work together in full awareness of who we are, what we bring to the table, and what we can do for each other. So, if you'd like to fight me and help me develop these skills a little bit better, the comments are pretty much always open, at least at this point, probably will be indefinitely. In the end, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will.